Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch. I'm going to react. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's watch.
I need this job done. And number two, if you need the work, that's a good marriage.
Do I want it? No. Because you're going to do the same thing as you did it over a house. How is it going to be? Like, just tell me the truth. Because you, as a personality, would you hold it against me?
I'm going to treat you just like I treat any other contract.
The situation of the house.
So, I don't know. But Andrei seems to have somewhat of a complex with the father. He might have some history, maybe with his own father, maybe with authority in general, because on one hand, he is acting like someone that is irresponsible. Now, maybe soon he'll get a job and everything will work out, and he'll be able to provide for the family the way that he wants to. Now, there's another option that some families will do, whereas he would stay home with the kids and Elizabeth would work outside the house. There's nothing wrong with that as well. But Andrei, from the beginning, has been saying, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to provide for the family, Elizabeth doesn't have to work, that sort of stuff. So he wants to do that. But on the other hand, he is acting irresponsibly. He's not doing the steps that you need to do in order to get a career. Now, is that because he doesn't understand how to get a job in the United States? I don't know. He seems like he's a smart enough guy. He worked in Ireland for a while. I can't imagine that Ireland would be that different from the United States in terms of employment opportunities and the sort of steps you have to go through in order to get jobs. I don't know. There's just no way for me to know. But he's acting in this irresponsible way. He's like, I'm going to be a trucker, but he doesn't look into actually what that is. And then when he finally does, he learns he doesn't actually want to do it. Then he says, oh, I'm going to be a handyman, and I'm going to go online, probably on Craigslist or something, and I'm going to get hired that way. I would imagine that's a pretty hard way to get work, and it's probably really spotty and not very dependable. Who knows? But now he is going to the father, and I think he's kind of hoping that the father will hire him. But in this conversation, so the smart move is for him to say, you know what, I need a job and I'm having a really hard time, and fine, I'll work for the dad. I don't want to work for him. I'll swallow my pride, whatever. I'll save up, I'll work some connections, I'll get another job in a year. I can move on from the dad and everything will be fine. But that's not what he's doing. What he's doing is he's going right into this conversation with the father, the one person that can actually get him out of this financial situation, and he's fighting with him. And he's really focused on, are you going to hold this against me? Are you going to hold this against me? Now, on the other hand, some people could say, well, the father is being unreasonable. He is prideful himself. He wants to be in control. He might poke and prod Andrei, and Andrei has reasons to be worried about that, of like, hey, if I work for you, you're just gonna hold it over my head. But I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder if a lot of the issue has to do with Andrei, or this is a significant part has to do with Andrei's issues with authority and his worries of humiliation. So I don't know, but a lot of times the one thing we're worried about the most, so let me just start from the beginning. Someone, I don't know about Andrei, but let's say someone is raised in an environment growing up where they feel powerless a lot and they feel humiliated a lot. They're being put down for being irresponsible or something like that. They're 5 years old, they're 10 years old, and they develop this complex around authority and humiliation and responsibility and feeling competent and not being anxious when you try to do something on your own. And you have this conflict going on in your head. You've internalized it. Then you become an adult and you start to try to build a career, but you have all these second guesses because you have those internalized voices of humiliation and intimidation and people getting in your way, and that trips you up, and you might avoid career building. You might avoid looking into careers, and you might have to develop a very narcissistic, optimistic, pathologically optimistic idea of like, well, everything's going to be fine because I need to believe that because I'm actually on the inside humiliating and shaming myself because of those internalized voices from my childhood. So I need to believe that everything's going to be okay. And whenever anyone asks, I'm going to say, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to work it out. Everything's going to be okay. Then a father-in-law comes along. He has all the power. He has all the keys. He has the reins. And if I can just get him to help me, then that would be great. But he has a little bit of that power hungry attitude, which triggers my past, my humiliation. I feel like he wants to humiliate me. But the issue is that the father, if Andrei would just work for him, or get any job for that matter, and work this all out, the father probably would just let go of the whole thing, I think. Maybe there'd be little prods here from the father, I could imagine that, but probably not a lot. But what's happening is that Andrei is actually provoking the father to being even more humiliating to him, because the father has reasons to look down on him and to criticize him. And that internalizes that voice even more of like, I'm a terrible person. I can't do things on my own. And then he gets up in his head about it, and then he avoids it, and he has pathological optimism about it, and the cycle goes round and round and round. So I'm beginning to wonder if that's the case. I have no idea. I'd have to ask Andrei about this, but let's keep that in mind as we watch more.
I give you a job. I want certain results for certain.
And I thought you're gonna call me and be like, hey, I gave you a job, and this and that.
That's the problem I have. My daughter, she doesn't see me lording over you and saying, oh, this is what you got to do.
But you're gonna do that. I would not want you as my boss. Do you understand me?
No.
So again, maybe Andrei is right. Maybe his prediction, my dog is barking, maybe his prediction that the father will lord over him is correct. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the father will do it on the scale of 1 to 10. He'll do it like at the rate of 2, which is pretty low. But for Andrei, he's convinced it's going to be a 10 based on his past. And so he's really worried about that and really sensitive to it because of what happened to him in his past. So, and as he tries to avoid that voice from the father, and as he tries to avoid that criticism from the father, he's actually incurring more criticism. And that's the way these kind of personalities work, is that those internalized abuses that we go through growing up, we tend to find people that emulate the abuse we went through when we were growing up, and we end up unconsciously provoking the other person to once again abuse us in the way that we are abused growing up. And we have an overreaction to it, which might even cause more abuse happening. It's one of the tragedies of early childhood abuse. Now, I don't know about Andrei, but it is an hypothesis.
Events that happened being between us and all the relationship what we had and the experience what we had, it's not good. I think there's like a certain balance in somebody getting involved into your life, and family is family and business is business. So it's just a matter of principle. I'm not going to work for him.
Now, that is totally fine. I am not interested. In fact, probably the best case scenario is for Andrei to get a job not for the father. I assume in their town, wherever they live, there are lots of career opportunities. And we're wearing a very similar shirt, him and I. It's great that he doesn't want to work for the father. I don't care if he does. But the key is that if there is some traumas in his past that are tripping him up in terms of his career path and his ability to really think rationally and take actions, rational actions, towards a career, then I hope that he gets the therapy that he needs.
No, Andrei has no understanding of what it takes to get on your feet financially in America. He thinks that he could just go out and find good employment, but it's just not that easy. So he has no clue. We don't need to do this back and forth.
You know what I think, honestly? You know what?
So that is often the conclusion that people will make with someone like Andrei. They'll just say, he has no clue. He is naive. He doesn't know what's happening, or he's trying to get away with something. He's lazy. That's almost never the case. Usually what's happening is something relational trauma-wise, and a common one in a case like Andrei would be humiliation traumas from our childhood, or being made to feel incompetent, being made to feel like you're always going to screw things up. And when you have that voice inside your head and you believe it, and, because in order to, for all of us, for all y'all, I'm quite sure this is a universal thing if you've ever had any kind of a career path. When you start to apply, and we often feel like we don't have any business asking for the job. We often feel incompetent. We're like, oh, there's competition. I'm sure there's better qualified people than me, this sort of thing. I mean, not everyone. But, moving down the road of a career usually will shred routinely our ego to begin with. Imagine if you had traumas of your ego being attacked and torn down when you were young. When you head into a career path and all the barriers and all of the onslaughts to your ego that it can have, then it's going to be really, really hard. So the point is getting, moving down, starting a career, starting from the bottom, moving your way up is hard anyway. Imagine if you have some kind of relational traumas that really exaggerate the problems to the point where you just become paralyzed and you have to become pathologically optimistic. You have to avoid everywhere you can. You have to have really complicated irrational ways of thinking consciously so you can push people away because you're always trying to get people to not know that you're really sad and hurting on the inside. I don't know. It's just an idea. It certainly would explain a few things for Andrei, but who knows? All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.